Heritage and family history has always played a large role in my life. My Irish roots have always been of great pride to myself. The retelling of family stories and frequent trips to Ireland has surrounded me with a rich understanding of my heritage, which I am fortunate enough to have. Through this film I wanted to retell my grandma's life, as she and her stories have been a significant part of my life. Our conversation had to take place over Zoom due to current COVID-19 restrictions. As my grandma has no laptop or Wi-Fi, my dad, through an extended household, came over and set up a Zoom call.
Hello, Rebecca.
Hello, Grandma!
I wish I had my hair done.
My grandma, Rebecca Healy, was born in 1935. She grew up in County Leitrim, Ireland, alongside 7 other siblings. We began our conversation by discussing the poor and rural conditions my grandma and her family grew up in. Do you remember what it was like being a young girl in Ireland?
Tough. On a good day, you had a bicycle. But I never went any farther than the bicycle took me. And the bicycle was treated like it was the Rolls Royce. My father had a bicycle, a man's one, and there was a great big bar up there. And we couldn't get on that. I used to ride with my legs.
What was your education like?
Oh, you got the cane for little or nothing. Yeah, if you didn't know it. If you got it wrong, you got it. And we learned the geography of Ireland, mountains, main towns, a lot, in Gaelic. We were supposed to go home and speak Gaelic at home and get our parents to do it, because they didn't grow up when Gaelic, when they got, what was it called? Oh, they got freedom that we did in Ireland.
We then began to talk about the type of housing Moira grew up in. The photo we discussed was taken in 1969 after the house was renovated. Originally, the house had a thatched roof, which could be seen in this photograph. So how many rooms was the original house?
3, 2 bedrooms and 1 kitchen.
What were the bedrooms like? Where did you...
The beds were full, and just head to toe. To be 3 of them that way and 3 the other with your feet up. And that room there was where my parents slept and the babies. And then they got kicked out, the babies, and they went down to the other room, they did. But there's another one come along. But don't forget, there was 9 of us. It was a tough fire.
Was the fire in the kitchen then?
Yes.
Yeah.
That little wall used to be a bowl of water. We'd wash our face out on that wall.
Yeah, because the old house mustn't have had much, wouldn't have had running water.
No.
No.
No electric.
No electric, no.
No. We had tilly lamps. There were thousands of houses, the same thing.
As my grandma described, the conditions of many in Ireland were harsh. The devastation of the Great Famine in the mid-19th century was still being felt by many. As my great-grandfather stated.
And you know what he used to tell us? Trouble is with us, we were too well fed. But he grew up when things were worse, not long after the famine. And I used to think to myself, when he'd say that, if I got any less, I'd die.
The famine had caused mass starvation and disease, and led to the Irish population falling by 25% from life lost to immigration. Even 100 years later, in the 1950s, the opportunities for young people like my grandma were few. As land went to sons, all of the daughters in my grandma's family ultimately left Ireland. So what year did you emigrate to England?
52.
52, right. And why did you decide to emigrate?
Because I wasn't They didn't like Harlow.
What was the housing situation like when you moved to Birmingham originally?
You had a room, it was half the size of this, and there was 3 of us lived in that room. There was myself, my sister Kathleen, and another girl, Mary Lynch. I got £3 a week, I did, wages. I paid £1 for my room, and I had £2 left to buy my clothes, buy my bus fares, eat, anything. And I was hungry most of the time. And I worked at Cadbury's, and I used to bring the chocolate home, and Kathleen used to be glad because she was hungry too. You could eat as much as you want, but you weren't. But I had to bring it home for Kathleen. Rooms advertised on the notice boards up the road would be no Irish need applied, or no Irish, no blacks, no dogs.
How did that make you feel when you saw those signs? Did that make you feel quite unwelcomed?
Never took any notice.
Oh, really?
That's how it was. That was it. You didn't question.
So was Birmingham the first big city you experienced?
I hadn't been out of Leitrim. I hadn't been out of Ochavas. I had to learn to get on a bus. When I got on, I had to learn how to get off the bus.
Was the environment just completely new to you?
Yeah, everything was different, everything.
Was it quite scary?
Well, then again, the fact that I was glad to be out of Ochala, you'd forget. You'd accept it.
And was the culture different?
The what?
English culture. Was that different from your Irish upbringing?
Yeah.
How so?
No, I didn't have a problem with that.
And these were the clothes you were able to buy with your new wage from working?
Yeah, you had to save up to buy something.
How long do you think it would have taken you to save up for these coats?
Oh, it might take me a month or more. You'd go hungry to having to buy something. You wouldn't have much money, but it didn't bother me.
Did buying clothes feel quite important to you?
At that time, yeah.
And the area of Birmingham that you were living in, was there a large Irish community there during that time?
Yeah.
And
mostly my age.
Were you friends with like a lot of Irish people?
Yes. Yes, it was the Irish dances.
You missed your family quite a lot, I'm assuming, back at home.
Did I miss them? Yeah, I missed the young ones, younger than me, the children. Michal and Brendan and Jack, Frank. Yeah.
Did you used to write letters home?
Yeah.
And you'd go back every year to visit your family?
Yeah.
Even after settling in Birmingham, my grandma and her own children would visit Ireland every year. Fortunately, these trips were always recorded by her own camera skills. We discussed some of the photos from these trips.
Well, look at that. Wasn't she snooty? I must have thought it was the bee's knees. Yeah, I remember that dress.
Did you buy it in England?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I had no money when I was in Ireland. What used to happen when I went to Ireland in them days, Beezy was there. I'd pack my things ready to go. I'd come back to Birmingham, my clothes were missing. I thought I'd forgot them. You know, she told me after. She used to go on my case and stick them. And check. I bet I took all these sort of stuff.
Yeah, this is lovely. I love this.
You know, I've never seen anybody else with a camera around the whole lot but me.
I'm really lucky that you did, that we have all these photographs.
Looking back, yeah.
Yeah.
But I didn't think anything at the time. Some people would think that would be a waste of time. And yet, now it's history.
So who's in this photograph, Grandma?
My daddy. And that looks like maybe Brendan, I don't know, or Anthony.
I think that's my dad. That's Steve.
Oh, that is your dad. That's your dad. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because you take your children with you when you.
Come and have a look at yourself.
Yeah.
I think I missed me calling. I should have been a photographer. Yeah. You know what I used to do when I come back to Birmingham? I'd help them develop and I'd send them on to Wahala. And I hadn't got enough money to get them for myself. So there ended up more photographs in Wahala than I've got.
Whilst my grandma had settled in England and begun a family of her own, there was a period of civil unrest called the Troubles. This period of conflict, which began in the 1960s and lasted around 30 years, was driven by the efforts of the Irish Republican Army, commonly known as the IRA. They wanted to reclaim all the 32 counties of Ireland, as the province of Northern Ireland was still part of Great Britain. There was conflict from both sides, with organisations such as the British Army and the Royal Ulster Constabulary, the RUC, being involved. The period was marked by several forms of low-intensity conflict. One of these acts of terrorism was the Birmingham pub bombings in 1974, where bombs were exploded in pubs, causing 21 people to die and 182 to be injured. These instances affected Birmingham as a whole. I was cautious to discuss this period as it was distressing for my grandma and her family. Do you remember the Troubles quite vividly?
Oh, yeah, very much.
And
yeah.
How did that affect your life, and what did you think of the Troubles?
I hated the IRA because they made trouble for us. It was fine. I didn't need anything to come and fight for me, but they caused trouble. If I had a gun, she said, I would shoot every Irish person. Yeah.
And that's very violent, and was that quite scary?
Yeah.
Whilst there was significant conversations to be had about the later years of my grandma's life, they were too sensitive to cover in our conversation. She still lives in the house she bought in the 1960s. However, she lives alone, and I think the conversation we had together was difficult for her. Due to the lockdown, she has spent the past year isolated from others. Her relationship to Ireland has always been complex. Often on trips we had spent together in Ireland, she was more reminded of harsh times. Whereas for myself or my dad, Ireland represents a place of enjoyment. I feel the contrast between sleeping in a bed with 7 other siblings, so living in an empty family home must be difficult for her. Whilst I can engage and be proud of this history, it brings my grandma great pain, especially on topics such as the Troubles. The making of this film has made me rethink how I approach my heritage, especially whilst I have